Okay, thanks everybody. So we're ready to go now. Just to let everybody know, we do record these conversations so we can share them later with other community members. As mentioned before, my name is Lisa Kohler. I work at the Halton Environmental Network, and I am part of the OakvilleReady team, a collective group made up of the town of Oakville, Tricia Henderson, Deputy Fire Chief Andy Glenn, as well as our faith-based organization hubs and partners. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the land upon which we are residing today here in Oakville. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor, care for, and respect all the creation gives to provide us with life. This includes the land, water, air, fire, animals, plants, and our ancestors. The Anishinaabe peoples have utilized this land for millennial, and we'd like to acknowledge their direct descendants, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land upon which we work, live, and conduct ourselves. We acknowledge our treaty relationships and responsibilities to both the land and these original peoples. We also recognize that this land is rich in pre-contact history and customs, which include the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, and since our European contact has and continues to become home for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. And it is in the spirit and intent of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, whereby we will collectively care for and respect the land, water, animals, and each other in the interest of peace and friendship, and for the benefits of not only ourselves, but our future descendants. And with that, I'd just like to review now what the OakvilleReady program is. Hopefully many of you do know the OakvilleReady program. It has been graciously funded through the Oakville Community Foundation. The goal of the program was to establish 6 hubs throughout Oakville that would support our community short term, so for 1 to 4 hours during the event of power outages. So again, any extreme weather that we might be experiencing, the hubs were to open up and provide a warm cup of tea and a place to get information about the power outage, etc. It is based on a philosophy of neighbors helping neighbors in times of challenge. We have engaged diverse stakeholders within our community. We do hope that the program increases community capacity and resiliency. And we also want to our community understand that really by working together, we can overcome almost anything. We felt the need was evident. We have, with the events of climate change, we have seen an increase in challenges, weather-related challenges such as flooding here in Oakville. We've also seen more wind episodes in Oakville, and thus that's why we wanted to enact the READY program. So again, the hubs were to be launched within the first 1 to 4 hours. They are embedded throughout our community, and it is for to ensure that our community is resilient and ready to weather any storm. So in light of current challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic, the OakvilleReady program has pivoted. We are providing technical support for our faith-based organization and our hub partners. They are currently providing resources and wellness checks for their own communities. We have started resources and resource building on our OakvilleReady.ca website. We do also continually update our Twitter account with information from the region of Halton and the town as well. If you are having any challenges with COVID-19, we urge you to go to the Halton.ca website. As well, you can dial 311. The region of Halton is the group that is managing the current challenge for our community. So again, if you do have any issues related to COVID, please go to the Halton.ca website or dial 311. We'd also like just to draw your attention at this time to the chat box. We will be fielding questions at the very end for the Oakville Parent-Child Centre. And if you have any general questions, you can use the chat box. For anything private though, please feel free to email Christine at the OPCC directly. Her email is in the chat box. Just to flip back to the OakvilleReady program, here are our current hub locations, the Church of the Incarnation, St. Paul's United, Knox Oakville, Kerr Street Missions, Maple Grove, Shari Beth El, and St. Cuthbert's. Again, this program would not have been possible without without additional supports from the region of Halton, Faith in the Common Good, and Crew. So I'd like to welcome Nikki Taylor now to the call. Nikki is going to take it from here. Nikki is from the Oakville Parent-Child Centre, and Nikki, you can take it away from here.
I'd just like to thank OakvilleReady and Andrea and Stephanie and Lisa, who are all behind the scenes managing everything else so that Christine and I can kind of focus on this. So thank you to you ladies. Couple of things. The slide deck that you're going to look at will be available in a couple of places online. So we'll confirm where those will be, certainly on our website. And I believe Halton Environmental Network will also have it on theirs. So if you're a note taker and things, no need to do that. We will make sure that the slides are available for you. So my name is Nikki Taylor. I see lots of familiar faces, so hi all you people I know. I'm the family, or no, I'm not. That's Christine's job now. I am the Senior Manager of Early Years and Family Support at Oakville Parent-Child Centre. I've been there for 19 years, and for about 16 of those years I was doing all the family support and parent education. So that's sort of what brings me to this table and lets me speak to you about what we're going to chat about today. I have 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren, one of whom lives with me, so pardon me if we have any interruptions. I'm also in the family room, so the dog may need to go out to the backyard, so I will apologize in advance for anything my family might do that causes us a bit of a distraction. Anyway, so we're going to talk today about working from home with young children, which is almost as challenging as the situation we find ourselves in. I think it can be tough to do anything with young children, but when you're trying to juggle things, it's that much harder. So what I'm hoping to do is sort of acknowledge some of the pressures that we're all living. Some of us will have different ones, but I sort of, off the top of my head, found a few that I think we can all relate to. Then I want to chat just a little bit about the opportunities, because sometimes it's easy in situations like this to really stay stuck in the negative, and there are always opportunities if we choose to see them. So I'm just going to highlight a few things that come to my mind. Then I'm going to talk a little bit, we need some context about what we're going to do or what we can do with young children at home. And that context is really around relationships and child development. So I'm going to do just a little bit about that so that you've got some things to think about. My job is never to tell people how to parent their children. I parented my own, and I messed up at times, and I did okay at times. My job is really just to give you things to think about and different perspectives to contemplate as you make decisions about what you're going to do with your own children. So I just want to put that out there. And then I have roughly 20 or 25, very short, but sort of strategies and things to think about in terms of how you might be able to be a little more successful and less stressed about working at home with young children. So we are talking about children sort of up to 6. Developmentally, there's some big shifts that happen after that. In private, we're happy to, Christine and I are happy to field questions about children who are older if you're struggling with that. But this particular presentation is about up to 6-year-olds. So we will have all of that in context. And Lisa, if you want to get started, thanks. So here's some of the things that came to my mind about what we're dealing with. I think the biggest thing is the uncertainty and the fear. We don't know what's going on. We don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know how we're going to come out of it. We do know we are going to come out of it, but we don't know how. We don't know what the world's going to look like. We're afraid to get sick, all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of that that we all share. The isolation. We are social beings by biology. So for many of us, the online thing is great. It's nice to see people's faces, but it's not the same. So people felt isolated before. There's a good chance you're feeling more isolated now, particularly those of you who work out of the house, and part of your social network is those people you work with. So there's lots of lots of feelings of being alone and not being able to contact. And I think the directives we've had to stay away from people make it that much more stressful and difficult for us. It's not a choice anymore. So that sort of plays on our psychology as well. Changes in lack of routine. So our routines have changed. In some families, there is no routine anymore. So that can be very, very stressful. We'll talk about that in a bit. Certainly job security and income. You're working from home now. How long is that sustainable? What does that mean? All those kinds of things. High levels of stress and anxiety for all those other reasons. Lack of a sense of control. So when we feel anxious, whether we're sort of biologically predisposition to anxiety or whether we're anxious just because of the situation we're in, our brain doesn't function as well. And we like a sense of control, and it soothes and reduces our anxiety. So often when we don't have control in our lives, it enhances and increases our anxiety. Like I say, whether we're sort of just that way biologically or whether the situation has caused that. So there's a lot more anxiety, I think, and a need to control things, which in parenting can be difficult, especially with young children, because they're not really controllable, as you all know. Living in closed and restricted quarters. So I was walking in my neighborhood the other day, and another couple that I know down the street looked at me and laughed and said, "So are you still married?" And I said, "Well, there's not really anywhere to go right now." So you're kind of stuck. And again, it's being forced on us. So that makes it a little more difficult and more stressful to cope with. But we're kind of stuck in our homes. We're not supposed to be going out a whole lot, those kinds of things. So that weighs heavily and causes some pressure. Certainly, if you're working from home, competing priorities. So how do you juggle all the balls in the air and give your kids what they need and give your bosses what they need, or if you're the boss, giving your staff what they need and your clients and all of that kind of thing. And then balancing the expectations of yourself, your kids, work, family, all of those things. It's a lot to have. And then staying healthy and feeling safe is also another pressure. So we're very focused now on, I know I go to the grocery store about once every 10 or 12 days, and I'm so much more conscious now of what I touch and where I go. And so there's just a lot more stress in just doing the regular day-to-day things that we've always taken for granted. So those are sort of some of the pressures. Like I say, they're certainly not an exhaustive list, but I felt like those were sort of the ones that came to my mind first and foremost. Now for some opportunities. So I like this quote: when there's change, there's opportunity. And we know there's certainly a lot of change right now, and there's going to be things that change us forever or for at least a very long time. So in that, there is some opportunity. So the first one is resiliency. So we're not born with resiliency. It's something we learn, and we can't learn it without experiencing adversity. And I can't think of adversity more compelling than the one we're in right now. So there are opportunities to build and hone some of those resiliency skills. For better or worse, there's more time with your family. And again, it's if we see it as an opportunity and not a chore, we can get to know our family again a little bit better. We're not as busy anymore. We can be more focused and just start to enjoy our family without all of the external competition that we often have when we're busy in our lives. A slower pace, which is good for our mental health as our physical health, as well as our stress levels. It's certainly better for the kids. Children have difficulty keeping up with the frenetic life that we tend to lead. It's difficult for us as adults to keep up, so it's that much more difficult for our children. We have opportunities to get healthier. So I know with my coworkers and things, we keep talking about how much we're eating more, which is not necessarily getting healthier, but there's also opportunities to take more walks and to do some more things to take care of ourselves. We get to learn something new if we want. There's a ton of stuff out there, particularly online. You may want to take up a hobby. So there's lots of opportunities because we have some time to maybe learn something new. Pick up a book that you've always meant to read, or a few, and take a bit of time to do that. Lots of people are decluttering their houses. Please do not put your bags near any of the donation boxes. They are not being managed anymore. So the stuff is just piling up and heading to landfill. So if you're going to declutter your house, which is great, hang on to those bags, and when this is all done, I'm sure the local agencies will be more than happy to take those things off your hands. Reconnecting with family and friends. I'm hearing a lot about people going on Skype and Zoom and all those things, and connecting with family members that they're not close to proximity-wise. So there's an opportunity and an urgency almost to connect with those people that sometimes we take for granted. We get to think and act in new ways. So that right now we might think that's a negative, but in the long run, it'll be a positive. We will learn some things out of this, and we will come out of this stronger and wiser about a lot of things. So we just have to be patient. We get to reconsider our priorities. In the busyness of life, we sometimes lose track of what's important. So this kind of gets to ground us a little bit and let us think about and reflect on what's really important. We get to practice some new skills. And if you look at any of the news, the global pollution, sort of from and Lisa could probably talk about this way better than I can, but there's been an enormous decrease in pollution and things. So just because I'm here with Halton Environmental Network, I thought I'd throw this one in. So we are actually giving our environment and our climate a bit of a break right now with all that's going on. So those are all good things. So let's talk a little bit about the kids, because they're probably the bigger reason you're here and trying to figure out what's going on. So the cause of a lot of what you're seeing and what you're experiencing is nature. It's biology, it's development, it's not necessarily in our control, it's certainly not in our children's control. It is a process that happens over a period of time that is determined by Mother Nature. The need for our children is the nurture part at this point in time. So children don't play, don't work, they play. We invited work as a construct many, many years ago, but young kids don't understand the idea of work. And often we don't portray a very good attitude about work. We talk very negatively about it. Our body language says, oh, I have to go to work again today. So over time, our children look at that and go, well, why on earth would I want to work? But in the meantime, they just don't understand the concept of work. Play is how young children learn, how they process, and how they make sense of the world. And also how they deal with big feelings. So play is essential during times of high stress for children. Quiet play, collaborative play, outdoor play, all of those things are very important. And the best advice I can give around play is the most effective and helpful play for young children is highly unstructured and child-led. So you don't need to plan it all. You let your children take the lead and figure out what they would like to do, and then your job is to help facilitate that for them. If they need your help. If they don't, then you can make your call or write your report. Competing needs and priorities. Children will always find a way to get their needs met. And if it's not in a positive way, it'll be in a negative way. And for children, negative attention is better than none. So when they're playing or they're being very well behaved, we tend to ignore them. And after a while, they start to figure out that in order for them to get any of our attention and acknowledgement, it happens much faster if they misbehave. So it's actually often a learned behavior. Doesn't start off that way, but that's how it ends up. So we want to make sure that when our children are doing what we want them to do, we're acknowledging that without interrupting them too much, because sometimes it can set them off on a different trajectory. But even just a smile or a wink, or, you don't want to interrupt them, like I said, but just something, even after the fact. I noticed how you were sitting and reading your book and that was really helpful. Those kinds of things. So try to be cognizant of not paying too much attention to the negative or understanding the why. And we're going to talk in a bit about some of the reasons why children behave the way they do, good and bad, that can sort of help you figure some of that out. High stress levels in children heighten their attachment instincts. So stress doesn't feel very good for any of us. And if we want to be honest, most of us, when we're stressed, would like to have somebody we're attached to be with us. Even if they can't fix it for us, there's a lot of feelings of calm and security in being with somebody that we're attached to and that we love. Children, their brain is very underdeveloped. And the last part of their brain to develop is the frontal cortex, which is the executive function. It's planning, it's organizing, it's controlling your emotion. It's all of those very complex processes. So when children are stressed, the executive function goes out the window. So their ability to talk through things, to calm themselves, to control their behavior, and all of those things are out the window. The emotional brain takes over, which is where kids live mostly anyway. And the emotional brain doesn't have much in terms of language. It has no ability to think through things and that kind of stuff. So children who are stressed become often more clingy. They become more emotionally needy. And this may be part of what you're seeing when you're working at home and your children are there. Their stress levels are high, yours are high, so they feed off of you. And often we don't feel overly available to our children when we're working from home. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But just know that high stress levels heighten children's need for attachment. And young children don't wait very well. This is a developmental piece. Toddlers in particular have very little ability to wait. But even in our older children, we live in a world of immediate instant gratification. And we're going to find out through this that that's going to make things much more difficult. So when we don't teach children to wait, and we find ourselves in a situation like this where they have to wait, wait for mommy to do the meeting, wait for daddy to get off the phone, those kinds of things, it can be very difficult because children, developmentally may not be able to do it. But even for the older children, their ability to do it, because they haven't practiced it, their ability to do it is compromised. So waiting in small doses to start is probably something that you'll have to consider. The counter will instinct is activated. So counter will is the instinct we have when we feel like we're being forced, manipulated, or coerced. And the instinct tells us to do the opposite or push back and defy. So the more children feel forced or tricked, often bribery and tricks like that will elicit counter will instincts in children. Do it now. Many of you have probably experienced, you do that and your child just stops dead in his tracks or goes backwards or just locks up his arms and says, I'm not doing that. That's all counter will. And it's an instinct that is designed to keep our kids attached to us and keep our kids safe from being influenced by people they're not attached to. The problem is if our relationship isn't in the right dynamic and the children aren't attached to us in the moment, the counter will instinct comes back and hits us. So often that defiance and those things are a sign that the relationship may not be quite aligned. And it's usually in young children a very quick fix to get that back. So it's something to think about. We all have counter will. When I learned about this a few years ago, I realized when I'm on the highway and somebody's trying to squeeze in or whatever, that I get this sort of feeling in me that says, I don't usually do anything about it, but I do get that instinct to who do you think you are? I gave you space and you didn't take it, et cetera, et cetera. So we all have counter will. So it's interesting to try and recognize it in ourselves as well. Next one. Thanks, Lisa. Children have become accustomed to being busy and entertained 24/7. So this is kind of like the waiting issue. So this is a bit of a cultural thing that it's the way we live our lives and the way we raised our kids. So we've kept our children very, 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 very busy and entertained to a great extent. A lot of what they do online is entertainment. Some of it is learning, but a great deal of it is entertainment. And they've become accustomed to relying on us as parents to provide that for them. So many of us, particularly me, because I'm older, I was sent outside to play. And that was it. I figured it out. My parents never organized my life for me when I was a kid. I had to figure that out. They fed me, they clothed me, they loved me, but it was my job to go out and, find my friends and find things to do. So our children don't know how to do that. So it's very difficult now in these situations that we find ourselves in to be able to say to our children, and again, for a 2-year-old, this would be completely inappropriate anyway, but even in the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, go find something to do. Again, this is a bit of a learned skill that we haven't taught our kids because we've had them busy in things and we've had them, programmed and scheduled to a great deal. So they don't know how to do this. So again, the opportunity is we've got some time now and some opportunity to teach children how to do this, but we have to understand they do need our help to do this. This is not something that they've learned yet. Young children have a short attention span anyway. So we also want to look at technology because we know it affects attention span, and it's a great tool, and when you really, really need it, by all means use it. But it does have effects later on. So we want to be sure that children are getting a balance of things. Some time outside, a little bit of tech, some play, some reading, all those kinds of things so that there's balance. But we do know that technology has a significant effect, it appears, on attention span. So even some of those, older children who've spent a lot of time on technology, one of the reasons they may not be able to pay attention if things aren't moving fast and highly stimulating is that their brains just haven't been trained for that. We've trained our brains for novelty. And if things aren't novel and new all the time, we get bored very easily. So, adult expectations often exceed the developmental ability of the child. I find this a lot. I've worked in childcare for 22 years and now with children and families for the last 19 at the center. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about what's reasonable and rational expectations in terms of children's development. The brain is significantly under construction in the early years. So even if a child can do something one day, it doesn't mean you can brush your hands and say, okay, so they've got that skill, let's move on to the next. Development is a very 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of process. And full maturity of the brain doesn't happen until the mid to late 20s. So when we're looking at 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds, in terms of development, these are still children in infancy in terms of development. So we put sometimes, because we're stressed as adults, we put a lot of expectation on our children so that we can get our needs met. And that can often backfire and create some great stresses for adults and children. Children have difficulty understanding that when they can see you, when you're working at home and they know you're behind that closed door even, but even if they can see you, that somehow you feel unavailable. So interestingly, we had a chat with a bunch of parents last week, and we had a number of moms saying the same thing. Now their husbands are working at home, and they as adults are feeling a bit perplexed about, and it's not that they're expecting their husbands to be able to step in and do all the things because they're working, but they as adults find themselves a bit confused and conflicted because they could use a little bit of help maybe at lunchtime or something, but their husband or their wife is working in another room and unavailable. So if we as adults are having a bit of trouble with this, imagine how difficult it is for a child to reconcile that I can see you, which is the most important part of attachment, is the proximity, being close. Yet emotionally and everything else, I can't access you. You're inaccessible. And that creates a great deal of stress for children. When you feel inaccessible, that's what separation anxiety is all about, all those kinds of things. It's more confusing for children when you're actually there, but not there. And the emotional brain rules. So young children, until they're somewhere between probably 5 and 7, are driven primarily by the emotional brain. So it is the most utilized part of their brain, and they are very easily activated into fight, flight, or freeze. So that's that sort of danger response. So we want to make sure that our kids are not in that fight, flight, or freeze place as much as possible, because it does create a lot of stress hormones in the body. And we know those are not good for us as adults, but they're certainly not good for children's brain development either. But children do function primarily in emotion. We function as adults primarily, for the most part, in our logical thinking brains. So we have this disconnect between where children are at. And so we're trying to logically think through a temper tantrum, for example. Well, a temper tantrum, there's no logic to it. It's a completely emotional response. So we have to remember that children don't have, especially when they're emotional and heightened, they don't have the ability to do things like talk through it or those kinds of things. So they have to be calmed down first. So there's lots of rules for parents with our fully functioning thinking brains to be using those brains to think about how we can get our children stabilized again so that we can then deal with the problem. All right, I'm going to run through this very quickly. I talk about this all the time. Those of you who know me, sorry for the repeating. So there's a guy named Gordon Neufeld who's a developmental psychologist in Vancouver. And he is my parenting, child development, all things human development guru. I love his work. So this is his model for how attachment happens. So he says it happens in 6 stages. So in the first year of life, and this is assuming all goes well and everything's, optimal, it can happen, can take longer than the 6 years. If for some of you, it's interesting, if you think about when you were dating or when you developed a close attachment relationship with somebody, you may see yourselves in these stages in that journey as well. So this is not just about children. It's also about sort of human attachment. So in the first stage, which for children is in the first year, it's all about the senses. So this is why we know that infants need to be responded to. They need to be held a lot. They need to be talked to. Everything that they take in terms of attachment and relationship is done through their sensory system. So with this knowledge, this is how we've come now to realize that things like cry it out may not be the best way to respond or not respond to an infant, because they need physical proximity and they need your voice and your smell and all of that kind of stuff. So not having those things and being deprived of those things creates a great deal of stress for babies. The second year of life is sameness. So those of you who have or have had toddlers, you'll recognize this. They want to be just like you. So they dress up like you and they talk. This is where language acquisition comes in. So that's not an accident. So they talk like you. This is another reason that it's important for language development to have human interaction and not rely on technology for language. Children can learn some language, but they learn it much better in the context of a relationship. They want to be like you. They want to do the dishes with you. They want to do the laundry with you. So it gets in the way, but it is a function of attachment. It is a way that toddlers and young children connect with you. They want to be like you. So they start to learn, if they can't be with you, then maybe they can be like you and still feel close. So this is all about children growing in a way that helps them learn how to feel close to you, ultimately, when you're not there. Year 3 is belonging and loyalty. Children at this age need to know that you belong to them and they belong to you and that you're on their side. So when you bring a new baby home, it doesn't feel like that. And often in this third year is when many families will bring a baby home. So all of a sudden, that sense of belonging to mommy and daddy and that sense of they're on my side and I'm theirs kind of goes out the window, because now you've got this baby. And young children can only do one thing at a time. So one attachment at a time, one feeling at a time. So they don't understand that you're capable of loving them and this new baby. So often you'll get some acting up and things in this stage when children don't feel like you're on their side and like they belong to you. One of the other things that happens here is things like when siblings are fighting, if your children feel like you're taking the other child's side, again, it doesn't feel like you're loyal to that one. So there's some often acting up and things that come from that sense of I don't belong in this family, I don't belong to you, you're not on my side, you always side with him, all of that kind of stuff. It's important to note as well that these things are not exclusive. So as children grow and the attachment relationship grows, you get more and more opportunities and different ways to attach. So by the time a child is in his third year, you've got the senses, sameness, and belonging and loyalty. So they're not exclusive of each other. The fourth year is about significance, the age-old question, if you're talking to a soon-to-be spouse or something like that, why do you love me? So why am I important? What is it about me that is important? So children in the fourth year want to know why they matter. Why do you love them? What is it about them? Those kinds of things. So these three gray areas, we're getting into some deeper attachment. The black ones are sort of very superficial. You have to be with, be like, belong. Now we're getting into sort of more emotional and psychological intimacy, if you will, and depth. So needing and wanting to know why you're important to somebody is a deeper level of attachment. Those of you with 5-year-olds will know this. 5-year-olds fall madly in love. They give away their hearts. It's a very vulnerable period, so they're very susceptible to being hurt. When my first granddaughter was 5, she sat here one day in my house and we have a lot of crafts. She made me a complete jewelry ensemble, complete with like a tiara and a necklace and a bracelet, full of hearts. Everything was hearts. So when you see your child preparing these kinds of things and talking about it in this way, this is the level of attachment this child is at now. So they're now falling emotionally deeply in love. You'll get lots of children that'll say they want to marry you. I'm going to marry mommy. I'm going to marry daddy. And again, in our culture, that's sort of the context that children see love expressed in. When you love somebody, you get married. So they're going to marry the cat, the dog, all of those kinds of things. So, and they are prone to, so anybody that they love, if anybody hurts them or doesn't reciprocate that love, they can be very deeply hurt. So it's kind of a vulnerable time as well, but it's a lovely time. And the final stage is about being known. We really want those we're closest to get us, to know who we are and what matters to us and all those kinds of things. So that's sort of the deepest level. That's a psychological intimacy, if you will, that we all strive for. And so those are the 6 stages. In the first 6 years, you'll see on the left-hand side, it says vulnerability. So these are very vulnerable times in a relationship. Once those are established and secure, then the piece that got cut off on my slide, unfortunately, on the other side, said maturity, that pointed from sort of the orange line up into the sky. So once we have all of those things in our lives and in our place, then we become mature. So it's kind of like the roots of a plant. The plants develop the root system first, and then the maturity of the plant happens. So we want to be careful with young children that we're working on in this sort of vulnerable area with them, and we're strengthening and developing that in our children, and not expecting a whole lot of maturity to come out of our young children just yet. Just very quickly, this is sort of a quick way to think about children's behavior. When children are behaving, and I'll talk about the challenging behavior because that's usually what brings everybody to things like this. So when we're looking at the why of behavior, so many of us were raised in a psychological construct that was very common called behaviorism. So it was all about extinguishing the behavior. Just make that behavior go away and everything will be fine. And that's one way to look at things. The developmental approach and the sort of way a lot of the research is going now is to really encourage people, parents, teachers, anybody working with children, to try and think a little deeper about what might be causing our children's behavior. Because when we get to the root cause, we can change the behavior. When we just deal with the behavior, very often what we get is either an escalation or we just get a different behavior that replaces the one we've extinguished. So it's not in the long run often very helpful. The developmental approach helps children to grow and thrive in a developmentally appropriate way. And there's lots of challenging and problematic behavior that is all part of growing up, and we should be expecting it and not being so shocked by it when our children tantrum and mouth off to us and don't listen to us. Those all have developmental functions for our kids. They're all part of growing up. So if we can sort of think about it that way, then maybe we won't get so thrown off and so concerned about some of the behavior we see in our kids. So the first one is around development. The first 6 years are ripe with development. So things are changing daily, weekly, certainly yearly. And children, it's one of the fastest stages of development for kids. So I would say, in particularly children under 4 or 5, probably 90% of the children's behavior, good or bad, is at least in part influenced by their development. Sometimes we overestimate skills they have, sometimes we underestimate things that they have or that they know. And again, development is not a straight line. It goes up and down and up and down. So we want to be very, very careful about not making our expectations based on, well, yesterday you could do it. Because in development, that's not how it works. Attachment is the next thing. So we know in the research, and the attachment research particularly, that if children are in what we call right relationship, if the attachment relationship is in the right dynamic, and I'll talk about that in a second, then children tend to be much better behaved. They are wired to follow the lead of people they're attached to. So when the relationship is not in the right dynamic, if we're being too directive, if we're stressed and we're cranky, if they're tired and hungry, if the relationship is just disconnected, and then you try to tell your child or ask your child to do something, there's a very good chance you're going to get counter will. Because the thing that dissipates and fixes counter will is attachment. So when you find your children particularly resistant and defiant and all of that, don't go running to the DSMV, because they're probably not suffering from ODD or anything like that. It can be a relationship thing. And again, it's often a very quick and easy fix. You've got to take a step back though. So in order for the attachment relationship to work in children, they need an alpha, which is supposed to be us. And we have a lot of families where children they are the alpha, or they're trying very hard to be the alpha. And that can create a problem, and that's a whole other conversation. But in order for us to be alpha and to have that position work and have the influence that we need, children need to be in a dependent mode. So the only way you can direct and influence and guide children is if they're willing to take all those things from you, which means they have to be dependent on you. They have to trust you. They have to be able to take those directions and those directives and those examples. So it's important that we are in that alpha role. It doesn't mean that we're controlling and dominant. It means that we have a presence that says, I am responsible and I've got this. And in a time like now, particularly the whole I've got this is really key. Children need to trust that this is an adult thing and the adults in the world are going to take care of this. And this is not up to any of our children to be worrying about, even though they will. We need to take that worry off of them. Temperament is an interesting one. So I always start this one with the nuts don't fall far from the tree. Temperament has a biological foundation. It is influenced by many things, but it is primarily, children tend to be born with certain temperament traits. So if you have a very feisty child, temperamentally, and you can't tell that with a 2-year-old because all 2-year-olds are feisty, but if you sense you have a feisty child, you have to approach that child differently, and you have to understand that this is a child who's probably predisposed to resisting you and arguing and asserting himself and those kinds of things, and not take it so personally. You may have a highly active child. That's also a temperament trait. And these children can't sit still. They have to have that energy expressed and sort of put out before they can actually sit still and do anything. So there's tons of information on temperament, but it's important that you understand the temperament traits of your children so that you can temper your own expectations of them and work with that temperament, because you have to learn to appreciate it, because that's like I said, there's a great deal of it is inborn, and it's just who they are. So we don't want our children feeling like who they are is not okay. Environment and expectations is the last one, and this is a big one. So we want to make sure we're putting our children into environments that are age appropriate, but also developmentally appropriate. There are some 3-year-olds that behave like 5-year-olds. There are some 6-year-olds that are kind of like at the 3-year level. So we don't always want to look at chronological age, but we want to put kids in environments that we know that they can handle developmentally, and not get so stuck on their chronological age. And the expectation piece, making sure that we're tempering our expectations and they're reasonable for the children's age. So when all of these things are considered, you get a better understanding, and you can sort of wonder and reflect on whether or not, or what parts of these things are influencing your children's behavior. And then you can deal with it at a deeper level and help children figure it out. Okay, here's the thing you came for. So here's some things to think about. Some of them are direct strategies. Some of them are just, again, things to contemplate and consider as you develop your own strategies. The first thing I think right now we all need, particularly at this time, is empathy and compassion. Not just for your children, but for yourselves. Be kind to yourselves. You're under a lot of stress. Self-compassion and being okay with yourself is important. Because reducing your own stress is important for your children as well as for you. Listen to your self-talk. We all have a little script in our head that tells us things. So when you're looking at your children, or when you're thinking about yourself in your life and what's going on right now, what is it you're saying? Because how you think about things drives how you feel about things and how you respond. So if your belief is that your 2-year-old that's tantruming on the floor is doing this on purpose just because you have a meeting and they know it, it's going to create a response in you that's probably a little harsher than it might be if you considered, okay, it's 11:30 and I haven't fed her lunch yet, and she's tired. So maybe this is the reason she's melting down. You're going to respond very differently. So it's important to take some time to think about what you're saying to yourself. Because again, it can drive what you think about a situation and then how you respond to it. Take care of all your areas of health for you and your family. This is first and foremost. Without your health, your work doesn't matter, nothing matters. And in times of stress, our health can become compromised. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. We're eating well, we're getting out for walks, we're dancing in the house, whatever we need to do. And there's tons of people online doing some funny things, obstacle courses in their backyards and things like that. So make it a priority, because if you're not healthy, then certainly you're not going to be able to work, you're not going to be able to take care of your children. It will have a lot of residual effects. Don't forget to have fun every day. It's a great stress reliever. It produces chemicals, healthy, happy chemicals in your body that can sometimes override a bit of that cortisol. And children have a great gift for having fun. So sometimes if you let them take the lead, you'd be surprised what kind of fun they can get you into. Managing your own stress and expectations. Are you expecting, given this is not the same this is not the same life it was 6 weeks ago. Are you expecting the same things of yourself and your family as you were 6 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago? Things have changed, and they've changed dramatically quickly. So we're always trying to play catch up a little bit. But be aware of your stress, pay attention to your body, take breaks every so often from your desk or your chair or wherever you are, and just, is your jaw clenched? Are your shoulders up like this? Like, how are you feeling? When's the last time you had a glass of water? Some of those sort of just self-check-ins are important to manage your own stress. And watch what you're expecting of yourself, because we often expect more of ourselves, and now may be the time to be letting go of a few things, to focus on the few things that are very important. This is a great one for the kids and for you as well. Create and maintain a predictable structure and routine. We talked earlier about needing a sense of control. Predictable routines and structure create that. They create a sense of, I know what's going to happen next, then we're going to do this. And we all need that, some more than others, but children thrive in having predictability. So allowing the children to plan some of their activities for the day gives them some ownership, so the counter will instinct is less inclined to come in, rather than you saying, okay, I've got a meeting now, you go play with Play-Doh. Kids are going to go, whoa, no, I'm not going to play with Play-Doh because you're trying to make me, even if they want to. So help children, whether you do it at night or in the morning or whatever, it's a nice connecting activity as well. Let your children, if they're old enough, help you plan out what's going to happen for the day, and what the structures and routines are, and try to stick to them as much as you can without being terribly rigid, because things happen. But they help with anxiety and things like that. This is a big one. Be mindful of the number of hours you're working. The tendency is to work longer hours when you're at home because the office is so accessible. So it's important that you set reasonable work hours and that you're able to put your computer away and turn your email off and turn your focus to where it needs to be at some point. And let children know when you're finished working. Okay, I'm all done now. I'm going to put everything away. Now we can go and play or whatever. In terms of the routine, I find, and I've talked to a number of people who are finding the same thing, working from home, it's easy to stay in your pajamas and kind of, some of us have lots of flexibility. So it's like, well, I don't really need to be on until 10 o'clock. And having that structure about, I'm on my computer at 8:30 every morning, whether I need to be or not. I'm checking my emails and things. I find having that regular structure, and at 4:30, I shut it down. So having that structure gives some continuity to the day. I know what I'm doing, all those kinds of things. It's not to say I don't go through a lot of laundry in once in a while, but just try and maintain some structure in your day around work. Frequent breaks to connect with the children. The younger your children are, the more they need this. They can't hold on to that attachment for very long. So even if it's just a snuggle and a quick story or a snack together or something, set your timers, set your alarm, make it part of your schedule to initiate the connection with your kids. If they're initiating, it's putting them in charge of the relationship, which is highly stressful. So you want to get in there and initiate that, if you can, before your children realize they even need it. So there doesn't have to be a reason. They're walking by, come here, and you give them a big hug. But you initiating it gives children a great sense of relief, that they don't have to be doing this, that they don't have to come to you for hugs or for whatever they need. You're going to them. So that's important. Find ways to let your children feel you've got this. So again, it's that sense of alpha, that sense of I'm in charge of this. And saying to kids, you don't need to worry about it, doesn't help. So we want to take on as much of the responsibility for some of this stuff right now, particularly right now, as we can. So we're in charge of the routines and the structures and when we eat. And that doesn't mean that children can't have input, but we're in charge. We're in charge of bedtime. We're in charge of when we do things, because children need that sense of you're in charge, and you've got this. So when they want to talk about COVID, if they want to talk about it and things like that, depending again on the age, for very young children who you don't believe have any ability to control it, which most of us don't anyway, or to really understand and be able to separate themselves from it, then the verbiage is, you know what, this is a grown-up thing. There's lots of grown-up people, adults taking care of this and finding ways to fix it. We're going to be fine. And those are the kinds of messages that kids need. We're going to be fine. I've got this. As an adult cohort, we've got this. You don't need to worry about this. Set up children's play areas close to you. So I know sometimes the tendency is to come into your family room or your office and close the door. And like I said before, the more inaccessible you feel, the more children ramp up, the more they try to get you, if you will. So when you can set up children's play areas close by where they can see you, A, you're modeling work, which is okay, but B, you can give them some nonverbal, you can be available to them when they need you. I know it's not ideal and it depends on your job. Hopefully most workplaces and bosses are quite understanding about the fact that we have to do this. And remember always that the proximity piece, the being with, is important for children. So the worst thing children can experience really from their perspective is separation. It creates a great deal of stress and anxiety for children. So the more inaccessible we feel, the more separated they feel from us, and the harder it is for them. So if we can find ways to stay connected, give them a picture of you if that's what it takes, or a piece of your clothing, like anything that's sort of concrete for young children that helps them stay connected if you absolutely can't be in the same room with them. I feel very strongly about this. We need to eliminate children's exposure to COVID-related information, not just, a little bit, all of it. Our young children are not equipped to handle this. They see our stress in it and it feeds them. And they don't have the ability developmentally to be rational or logical about this at all. They live very much in the moment. And we've already said they live in their emotional brain. So I've become a CNN addict. CNN should not be on. You shouldn't be talking about it really with your spouses and things, with children in the room. They feel the energy. So we really want to do our best to eliminate that so children aren't feeling that stress. Find your own connections, whether you've got family in your house or other ways to connect with friends and family to talk about it, because we all need to talk about it. We're all very stressed. But it is something we really need to be conscious of and buffer our children from, particularly when they're young, because they can't do anything about it. This is along the same ideas, helping release children of any sense of responsibility to keep themselves safe. Well, if you don't want to catch COVID, you'd better. This is not an approach to take with young children. So we want to encourage them to wash hands. We want to explain as best we can, depending on how old they are, to understand why we're physically distancing. There's some information online that's for kids about germs and things like that. But we don't want to make this a big deal. We don't want to make this a responsibility that if you don't do this, you might catch the disease. Because again, that's much too much for children to handle. So give them the things that they can do and keep them buffered from everything else. Children do better when things are explained to them, just like all of us. So rather than go and play, I'm busy, or I can't play with you right now. For many children, if you explain what you're doing and explain the plan, if you will, then they're much more likely to be able to process it and work with it. And the more advanced notice you can give kids, the better. So if you're about to pick up the phone, it's probably not the best time to say to them, okay, so I'm going to be on a call. I need you to blah, 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 blah. Plan it ahead of time. In 15 minutes, I'm going to have to take a phone call. So I need you to play with, and what would you like to play with? So help children plan for the time until I'm done, and then we will, so when and then. So when I'm done my call or my work, then we will do something so that there's something in it for them as well. And again, help children plan for what they're going to do, because if you just say, go find something to do, young children, it's like sending us into, you know, a high-end jewelry store and saying, what would you like? And it's like, oh my God, I don't know what I want. So children need things narrowed down, and they need some help sometimes structuring. Well, here are your choices. Here's the 3 or 4 things you could do. Or what do you think you'd like to do? So it's a little bit of that setting routine and structure for them. We've talked about this a bit. Try and be as accessible as possible. Expect interruptions. It's kind of like when you're trying to cook dinner, but all day now. Because the more children feel they have access to you physically and emotionally, the less they need you. One of the best examples I can come up with for this is my daughter, one of my daughters, who's now 32. When she was little, she always wanted to sleep with me. And for me, that was a no-no. But so I would wake up in the morning and she would be sleeping in the threshold of my bedroom door, with her pillow and her blanket and her soother. And every morning I got up and it just broke my heart. So I figured, this isn't working. I'm riddled with guilt, and she's clearly not sleeping very well. She's on the floor. So I made a spot on the floor, because at that point I didn't want them in my bed. It is something I would rethink if I had little ones again, but it's too late now. So I made a spot for her on the floor beside my bed, and I gave her permission. I said, if you wake up in the night and you need to be close, here's a spot for you, and you can sleep there. And if you don't need to wake mommy up, please don't, because we all have to get up at 6 o'clock to be at work. And if you need me, then by all means, wake me up. Now, she was about 3.5 at this point. So again, this is not something you would do with an 18-month-old or a 2-year-old. You have to know your children. And what I found was just her sense of having access to me, if she needed me, created a scenario where she actually needed me less. So she did sleep a lot on the floor, but she woke me up much less because she knew she could. So the more accessible we feel to our children, and it's easy. We're doing this all the time. Go and play, in a minute. And often all they need is a minute or two, frequently through the day, is more helpful for children than, okay, you know what? When I'm finished my 8 hours of work, we're going to sit down and play for an hour. Most kids don't want to play with you for an hour, but they would like to play with you or have you accessible maybe for 5 minutes, 10 times through the day. So we want to think about that. When our children are asking us, inviting us in, if you will, we want to take those invitations. Mommy, come and see. That's an invitation in. And if we turn down too many invitations, eventually we stop getting them. So we want to just be conscious when our children are asking us not to go into that default mode that we all fall into that says, not now. If you can at all do it, especially right now, a couple of minutes frequently through the day may fill them up enough to get you what you need. If you have other people in the house, rely on them. We like to think, particularly as moms, that we can do it all and be it all and have it all. That is not true. So we need to become reliant on other people. So if there's family members that can help, please use them in helping with the kids. And if you can at all, if there's 2 of you working in the house, if you can at all set your schedule so that at least some of the day, one of you is available for the kids, that can be quite helpful as well, and can sort of let you focus some time because you know the other person has them. Now this one is a bit interesting. So we're a very independent focused culture. In order to be alpha, you need to have your children dependent on you. So again, it's part of that, I've got it, I've got you, I know what to do here. And even if you don't, you have to convince your kids you do. And they don't know any different. So it's okay. Parenting a lot of the time is an Academy Award-winning performance. You're convincing your children that you know what you're doing when you haven't got a clue. And we're all in that boat. There's no training for this. Just when you think you've got it, it's changed up. So, but it is important that children, we are in that proper dynamic of we're the alpha, we're in charge, we're responsible, and children can depend on us. So for many of us, by virtue of the fact that we're working and we're doing all sorts of things, and it is just our culture, we foster a lot of independence. So look for opportunities to create that sense of dependence. It is your silver bullet for parenting. If your children can't rely and depend on you and feel safe and trust, it's going to be very difficult over the long haul to instruct them, to guide them, to help them develop the way they need to. Now that said, the only way to learn independence, it's a great deal of it is a developmental thing. So children are ready for independence developmentally over time. But we can do little things to foster some independence as well. So things like setting out snacks and a jug of water so that children can help themselves through the day instead of always asking you, I need a snack, I'm thirsty. It's kind of like the bedtime thing all day. So set things up in the morning for children to have some independence and some ability to do some of that on their own so that they're developing those skills, but also they're not always coming to you for everything they need. So the social emotional needs of children are the ones that really the dependence piece is hugely important for. The self-help skills and things like that, children need to learn those. So those aren't the independence and dependence things I'm talking about. So we want to think about those things and how can we set up structures where children can, do some of those age-appropriate things on their own. We like to try and keep kids busy, and what we're finding is a lot of children, particularly when they get older, like 4, 5, 6, they like meaningful work. They like to do things that mean something to somebody, or, so trying not to, as a colleague of mine's 16-year-old son says, it's all about school, is busy work. So try not to just have kids doing things for the sake of doing things. They'll be much more motivated if they feel like they're contributing and helping in some way. So ask them, talk to them, think about those kinds of things. So we've talked about the alpha thing. So that's, we can go on to the next slide, Lisa. Use pictures and photos to help children understand the structure and the flow of the day. Children love to see pictures of themselves, but unless you have a printer at home, even just pictures of the things, toothbrushes and playtime. So anytime you can use pictures and photos and post them helps children, because they don't always process the language, can help children get through the day. You can use them for your schedule as well, and so that they can see that as well. And it can be very, very helpful. The small opportunities for age-appropriate independence I just chatted about, so letting them prepare snacks and things, or getting their toys, their activities ready for the next day, the night before, those kinds of things. If you can work at night, I know it makes for a really long day, but if there's even a little bit of your work that you can do at night once the kids are in bed, frees up a little bit of time to meet their needs. The bottom line is that young children are not able to put their needs aside so that we can get our stuff done. It's just developmentally not appropriate. So they're not really able to do that. So we've got to find creative ways as parents to meet their needs first, while still getting our needs met as well, because our needs usually contribute to a better life for our kids. This one's really important. Be aware of your sensitive children. So if you think you have a sensitive child, they are often more compliant and cooperative, generally. There are some feisty, sensitive kids as well, but the ones I'm sort of concerned about or think about are the ones that are very compliant and cooperative. Oh yes, mommy, I'll do that. Okay, I'll take care of my baby brother. Oh yes, you go to work, I'll make lunch. Like those kinds of kids, they're often highly sensitive kids. And it's easy to miss those cues because a lot of them tend to internalize. The feisty ones externalize, so you know where you're at with them. They internalize. And because they're compliant and easy, it's very easy to let them do their thing all day long, because they will. And that allows you to get your stuff done. But there's a churning and there's an internal thing happening in particularly those sensitive kids. It isn't always obvious. So you want to make sure that you are not ignoring those kids, that you are connecting with those kids throughout the day, because they have the same needs as every child, probably more so for filling up and connection. And if they seem to be really, really quiet and okay, just think about those things and again, it's your job to be the adult and in charge of the relationship. Last two. Bedtime is often, as you know, because this has probably been your life forever, children need more of your focused attention. And when there's stress in the house or stress in life, this becomes much more apparent. So putting kids to bed with less stress means they're going to sleep better. So you invest in the front end, in the bedtime routine, or you may end up investing all through the night when they're waking up or behaving badly the next day because they're tired. So allow enough time, and sometimes enough time, people say, well, how much is that? Depends on your child, but it's not unusual. And again, sensitive children require much longer. It's not unusual in times of stress for a young child to need 45 minutes to an hour to wind down and to decompress and to snuggle and to be with you and to feel the weight of the day fall away. There's some research that shows us that technology influences the melatonin production in our brains. So generally, screens should be off for 2 hours, an hour at the minimum, but 2 hours would be ideal before bedtime, because if the children don't have melatonin being produced, then they're not tired. So no matter what you do, they're not going to be tired until that chemical is actually produced. So the weather's turning nice, so you want to be outside as much as you can, getting fresh air and exercise. You want to limit technology, and you just want to make sure that there's a bedtime routine that allows enough time for children to talk to you if they need to, or to just feel filled up by the time they fall asleep. And I've said this already, children cannot put their basic needs for attachment, food, sleep, etc. aside. Their needs have to be met so that they can rest in that relationship and avoid feeling the need to be constantly seeking you out. And again, negative is better than none, so often that seeking out becomes a very negative thing. It's our job to buffer the things in the world that they're not ready to handle yet, and COVID is one of those things. We will get through this, and we will come out with new perspectives and wisdom. So, I'm not used to being the one that just talks and talks and talks. This is very strange for me. So, hopefully there's some questions, and that's what I have.
Well, thank you, Nikki. That was amazing. So much to think about. Really appreciate it. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. You can privately message Christine from the Oakville Parent-Child Centre as well, and she will get back to you. So please feel free to use her email. Her email is also on the screen right now, as is Nikki. So please feel free to reach out. As you can see, there's so much knowledge from the Oakville Parent-Child Centre. I used them when my kids were little. It's the best. So Nikki, Christine, thank you very, very much for joining us today and sharing these great insights on how to help the little people in our community. Let's just say that.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Oh, no, thank you. So OakvilleReady, we do have a website, www.OakvilleReady. Under General Resources, there is a webinar tab. This webinar and the slide deck will be up within the next 24 hours, so you can share it with friends, and maybe continue the conversation with Nikki and Christine. As well, we will be sending the slide deck back to OPCC, and they will also have a recording. So check their website too, please. And again, feel free to share that information, and please reach out to Nikki and Christine. Coming up next for OakvilleReady, we have 2 webinars. The first one is Tuesday, how to start your own indoor garden. It's very exciting. I know everyone's thinking about food these days. So we have that coming up on Tuesday at 1 o'clock, as well as we have Julia Hanna, a local restaurateur, a phenomenal woman. She will be teaching us how to cook from our pantry. She's going to teach us how to make homemade gnocchi and 3 different sauces using pantry items, so you don't need to go out and shop, people. You can just make it from your pantry. It's going to be amazing. So we hope you can join us then. Details are also on the OakvilleReady website. And finally, if you have an idea for another conversation, please reach out to us. My name is right there, Lisa Kohler or Tricia Henderson from the town of Oakville. We would love to hear from you. We are trying to reach out to some vets currently. We've heard some questions about COVID and animals, and we're trying to do our best. So let us know if you would like another conversation. Please reach out and we will do our best. Not really seeing any questions, Nikki or Christine, at this point. I'm not sure.
They often come later.
They could totally come later.
A lot of information to process.
But everybody, if you do have follow-up questions, please know that Nikki and Christine are there for you at the OPCC. And I guess with that, I will say thank you, everyone, for joining us on this most amazing call. Thank you very much, the Oakville Parent-Child Centre. Nikki and Christine, truly appreciate your time, energy, and the support you give our community. So thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.